This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the Mark Weber.
Dub them ease.
And we're back for another edition of the Onside Kick right here on Most Valuable Podcasts. If you're on YouTube, hello. It is great to see your wonderful faces. Could not miss waving to you guys as I move the microphone. If you're on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you are listening to us, mostvaluablepodcast.com, we thank you for listening to us today. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into our jam-packed show. First off, we have MVP t-shirts. You want to know how to get one? Description down below, but the short of it is all you got to do is email us your size, your name, your address, and then we'll tell you how much you got to pay in there. However, everything is in the description if you want to know. Go right down there. What's also in the description, patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. We cannot make these work. We can't keep these lights on without the help of Jake, Patrick, Christian, Brandon, our great patrons, Zani, Trevor, even old patrons. So if you want to help the channel like what we're doing here, check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. And last but not least, if you're on iTunes, have an iTunes account, give us that 5-star rating. It really helps us in the long term. Give us that good rating. Give us 5 stars. Then do the same for the Primetime Podcast, the Fast Break, and the Rick and Johnny Podcast. But Mark, got a jam-packed show today. We're going to be talking about the New York Giants, kind of talking about them again, as we kind of have talked about them the past few weeks. We're going to look at them, who could be their new head coach. Then we're getting ready for next week. Next week is our first mock draft of the season, and we're going to be looking at 2 draft topics, Baker Mayfield and the Browns, so stay tuned for those 2. But let's get into the New York Giants, Mark. Ben McAdoo, out of town in New York. There's one guy that everyone's looking at that the Giants are apparently going for. But I want to throw out a name. Usually I ask you, Mark, who do you think they're going to hire? I want to ask you this. I am looking at an article right now from 247sports.com. And here's what the headline says. You ready? John Gruden is open to coaching Giants if Eli Manning returns. Give me the hot take. Give me what you see. Could we really see John Gruden as the head coach of the Giants?
Well, first of all, you thought you were going to surprise me, but you didn't. You didn't, because John Gruden always comes up when it's coaching time. I think that Herm Edwards kind of opened the door a little bit for some of these ESPN guys to go back
since he left and went to ASU.
Yeah, which is his alma mater, if I remember correctly.
I think so, maybe.
So, sure, the door is open. Do I think that John Gruden will do it? No, because I still stand by that. He's got one of the cushiest jobs ever. And Herm Edwards does as well. But Herm Edwards, I would say, has less cushy because he has to go to work every day. Where John Gruden, he shows up for football on Sunday. On Monday. He shows up for the quarterback camp, and that's about it. That's all John Gruden does. And he probably is making more than Herm Edwards does. So someone could probably look that up for me. But yeah, I think he's got way too cushy of a job. He's got himself a ring. You know, he doesn't need to try and get himself another one. And there always comes by what people like to say when it comes to John Gruden was John Gruden won a ring with somebody else's team. And John Gruden, you know, I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I've never wanted to say that he's a bad coach. I think that people might overrate him a little bit. And I don't think that John Gruden should go out there and test that. It's very hard to be out of the NFL for a long time and then come back and try and coach again.
And let's be completely honest. The only reason we are talking about John Gruden in this time is in the Monday night broadcast last night, McDonough even mentioned, he's like, you know what? Your name always comes up. The exact quote is, would Coach Gruden consider coming to the New York Giants? Your name comes up every job. Gruden the first time goes, I don't believe half the stuff you hear and read, Sean. Then the next time he goes, one of our producers saw somewhere the odds of you going to the Giants are 35-1. Would you take the over or the under on 35-1? And that's when he said, I'll take the under if Eli comes back.
There you
so
go.
right now, it's like that. I would love that, actually, because here's the thing with the Giants, and I want to ask you before we get into candidate specific now that John Gruden is like there. We talked about it. Push it to the
we
side.
can move on.
Is this really, I kind of want to ask this with every job. How appealing is this New York Giant job based on just the last 2 years, the Ben McAdoo era alone?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you say specifically with these last couple of years, because I think these last couple of years have made this job extremely unappealing. You have everything you could possibly want in player talent.
The Super Bowl caliber talent, I'll say again.
The idea of, if Eli Manning comes back, Ben McAdoo's been fired, Eli Manning's coming back. That's the end of the story. I can't imagine a way he leaves now that Ben McAdoo and the GM are gone. Maybe he's got an issue with the owners because
of how they let it play out.
How they let things happen. And I do, to an extent. I agree with a lot of people that are saying, what was the point of benching Eli if you were just going to fire the coach? Were they going to not fire him and Geno Smith got a win? Was that the plan? It almost felt like the entire organization was very passive-aggressively punishing Eli Manning for lack of success these past few years.
Well, my whole thing with the Eli thing is I want to know exactly whose smart idea, and I say that sarcastically, whose bright idea it was to bench him, because if it's McAdoo and he has to go to the GM and then they have to go to Mara, somebody, I would expect if it gets to Mara, he'd be like, no, that's fucking stupid. Sit the fuck down.
That's why I personally think everybody was okay with it. It had to have gotten approval. Now, of course, Ben McAdoo is the head coach. He decides who plays and who doesn't play.
I would have done it differently, and I know we talked about this when it happened, but I would have let Eli start. Then when you're losing at halftime, okay, we're pulling the plug, Geno's in. Then you have a suspect to reason for doing it.
That's what they were told. That's what they actually told Eli essentially they were going to do, except for it was at halftime no matter what you're being pulled.
No, I would have I wouldn't have told him I would have done that, obviously.
Which I think is, a bit smarter idea. But anyways, although I still stand by, it was going to take Eli like 5 years to get to Brett Favre's record. He was never going to do it. It doesn't matter.
Well, it's not about the record. It's about the...
But the record is what people are hung up on.
Well, and this is why I'm telling you, it doesn't matter about the record. To me, what matters most about this whole thing and why Eli is most important in the head coaching search is, I think it wasn't Trent Dilfer, it was Hasselbeck, I believe, today. It could have been Dilfer. It was someone on ESPN mentioned, like, when you look at Eli Manning, he even said, he's like, I think Eli wants to be a Giant for life. He just wants to go out there and play and just be on the field for the Giants as the starter. Now, some of that is the Manning kind of thing, because when I heard Archie get interviewed about it after the McAdoo firing, there were parts of it where it's like, you never want to see someone get fired because of what it does. But part of me looked at that interview and went, you made this happen. You made this happen right now. Because you probably went to Mara and said, what the fuck is going on, man?
He might have, but I think that
Ben
Ben McAdoo was getting fired.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways.
No. But I think the Giants might have waited till the end of the season rather than Archie going. I think Archie deal is kind of like what you said a week ago, 2 weeks ago, that basically it's like Archie's going to, don't worry, I got this. I got this, Eli.
Archie tells the NFL to jump, and the NFL says how high.
But I want to ask you, with this job being as unappealing, because I'm with you, it's unappealing right now where the Giants are.
Not player-wise, just based on the organization right now.
There's a reason why when people say, wow, this is the first time the Giants have had to fire a head coach mid-season since the 70s. That shows you that the Giants organization is in deep shit right now. I want to ask you, let's say you're the new GM. Congratulations, Mark.
Thank you.
You're the GM of the New York Giants. Who are you looking at as your head coaching candidate to, this is my number one guy, this is who we're going with 100%?
Well, first of all, I need to correct you on something. Technically, Eli would not be a Giant for life. He was a San Diego Charger for about like an hour.
Okay. Technicalities.
So he was drafted by the Chargers. He just got traded immediately.
Had only worn a Giant jersey. How about that?
I'll give you that. Did he put the hat on, a Charger hat?
I don't know. Maybe.
Someone look it up in the comment section. Let us know. A lot has changed in the NFL draft, so who knows what happens. Anyways, the whole point is, okay, first of all, the head coach, any head coach is going to have to wait until the GM is hired, unless they're going to do something really weird, hire the head coach first, then put a GM in. It's a weird decision to make. If I am the GM here, the person that I think people are going to look towards is going to be this immediate person who's going to be talked about for everybody, and that's Josh McDaniels, because he's part of the Patriots organization right now. He had a failed attempt in Denver, but here he is doing really well under Belichick. Maybe this is a guy you got to look at, especially when you have a older quarterback. This is what it really comes down to for me. Somebody has to buy into, I can get one last Super Bowl ring out of Eli. Because he's only going to be there for 2-3 years, probably. There's a lot of money that was spent to get this team where it is. So a lot of those players are going to go off soon as well. They have been pretty well in the draft with a lot of their players who eventually you can't pay all those guys. So right now is this prime time. We talked in the offseason about how everything looked on the up and up for the Giants. Everything looked right for them to make that Super Bowl run. So you need someone who can come in and do it in 1 or 2 years. You need essentially like the Gary Kubiak to Peyton Manning, who came in, got it done for the Denver Broncos. You need something like that. Even though I'm bringing up Josh McDaniels right now, I don't think that Josh McDaniels is that guy.
I'm not in love. Like you mentioning that, I'm not in love with that because like with Josh McDaniels, I wonder if when we look back at McDaniels' career and it's going to wonder if he gets another head coaching job or not and proves us wrong, I feel like we might look back at it and go, good coordinator, not cut out to be a head coach.
For sure.
Kind of like Ben McAdoo.
Yeah.
Coordinator, fine. Head coach, you're horrible.
There's a lot of those. A lot of those head coaches, when they have their opportunity, it just doesn't work for them. Another big one that a lot of people are going to be talking about is Jim Bob Cooter.
He did, and he turned down a job recently on the college side. He turned down the Tennessee job.
No reason to go down to the minor leagues.
Yeah.
Stay in the big boy league.
Now, I want to ask you this. Jim Bob Cooter, Josh McDaniels, the thing I do like about the Giants pulling the trigger now is they get to...
They're front of the line.
They're front of the line. The only thing that I think hurts them in this is finding the GM, because everyone, Adam Schefter, everyone on ESPN, NFL Live, they're saying the same thing of, yeah, you can go out and get a guy that's just sitting there, but if you want somebody in an organization like X team, this team, you got to wait for that season to be over. I guess there's someone in the Cardinal organization.
Well, that season's over for the Cardinals.
The Giants are, but you got to wait until that season's officially over.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I think may hurt them is Mara could be, no, this is the head coach I want, but brings in a GM and that GM goes, no, I don't want that guy. That's the only thing that hurts you. If you just wait until that season is over, then it's like, guess what? You're not at the front of the line.
You're most likely going to wait for the season to be over anyways for the head coach. I mean, you're not going to take an offensive coordinator from somebody mid-season.
And that's what I say. I'm not saying like take someone mid-season, but I go back to Dave and I just had this conversation, and I tweeted about it, not thinking about the GM part of it, but the thing with the Rams that made the McVay thing so great is by firing Jeff Fisher when they did, they virtually had a leg up on everyone. Could vet their guy, could go through due process, could really make sure they were getting a guy. And it's like by the time other teams were looking at McVay and were like, hey, we want to offer you our job, he was pretty much in the Rams' pocket. And it was like too far gone. You had that opportunity, but because you had to fire the GM also, is that going to take that advantage away from you because you still have to wait until Black Monday when the regular season ends for who you want to go after?
I think that, sure, it's definitely kind of an advantage, but everything has to fall into place. Too, the GM is an extra thing for it. There's the people who have to want to play with Eli Manning. And as much as the world just stood up and defended Eli, there are still a lot of coaches out there who are going to say, old quarterback, the team itself hasn't been that successful. I don't believe Eli's ever been the guy to carry the team. especially in those Super Bowl years, there was a lot of things that helped Eli get there beyond his miraculous throw and catch. So there's a lot of people out there who aren't going to really want to tie their name to Eli for 2 years, maybe 3, and then whoever they draft. And there's no guarantee it's going to be a guy you like. And I think that's what makes this Giants situation hard. But with that being said, we got to remember too, the New York Giants are NFL royalty in a way. This is one of the big houses.
Well, they're like the New York kind of like. I want to say, like, when you say royalty, I want to say, like, the New York Yankees of football.
I don't know if I would call them the Yankees.
Except the Yankees have more championships.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I go, because, like, you're not like the Boston Celtics, where the Celtics are one of the most winningest franchises in the NBA.
And I don't think that you have to be, like, one of the most winningest. It's a really old, historic organization. I mean, well, this is a bad example now because Chicago does have some of the most NFL championships. But when you just talk about the Super Bowl era, Chicago is going to always be one of those historic teams. They've only got one Super Bowl.
Yeah,
and that's okay. It's okay. You can still have a lot of that tradition, that history, that legacy, where it means something to be a New York Giant, a New York football giant, to be specific. That means something. That's a big deal. So I think that's going to be something that kind of sells it a little bit. Plus you're in the New York limelight. It's a good place to be. It's an attractive job in that case. What I wonder is, you think back to some of these great Giants teams that we've seen in recent years. And yes, Eli Manning's always there, and there's these miraculous catches and things like that. But it's really the defense that makes the big deal. And I sit there and I wonder, do you go and try and find a defensive coach? Because Eli's going to be here for 2 or 3 more years, and then he's gone. Do you try and get a defensive coach to really solidify and build this team into that scary defense that we've seen when they've won championships?
Part of me says no. And the reason why I say no is kind of 2 coins. First one, the first side of the coin is easy. It's like the comments we've got when Brandon and I did the Bears segment of, should they fire John Fox? And we kind of talked about who they could hire in place of John Fox. I say don't go defensive because, one, it's an offensive league now. You got to be able to air the ball out. You got to be able to score points. It's not a defensive league like it was in the past. However, you could still have good defenses. Number 2, yes, you have Eli right now, but how long do you have Eli? Are you going to be confident in that defensive coach to then get your offensive guy to be the next quarterback coming in and develop that quarterback?
Which is true. It is true, but I just think of when you're looking at the team right now and you're looking at the longevity of Eli Manning and his career, he's best when he's got a good defense, which is pretty simple.
I want to throw this name
but I think that works.
I want to throw a name out at you. And the only reason I want to throw this name out at you is because this upcoming college season next year could be the hottest season for this head coach, Jim Harbaugh. Do the Giants have enough to entice him to leave? And the only reason I say that, before you maybe reconsider that,
I'm not going to reconsider it.
The thing that I look at, and I'm not saying this is for sure going to get him to leave, but the hot seat for Jim Harbaugh is heating up with most, could really be heating up next year, because Jim Harbaugh can't beat Ohio State, can't beat the big rivals, has a similar resume to coaches that have already been fired in college football. Like, there was one thing I saw from Paul Feinbaum where basically him and Brady Hoke, who Brady Hoke was fired before him, have very similar resumes when it comes to Michigan. Could the Giants do enough, or do they even think about, hey, let's try to entice Jim Harbaugh to come in, because look what he was able to do with the 49ers when he had our defense is better than what they had, but he has a quarterback who, Kaepernick was good Kaepernick, I'll say, even though Kaepernick could still be good enough to be an NFL starter. that was better Kaepernick, and we think Eli's better than that.
Well, you would hope if you can pull that off that maybe you can keep the connection between Harbaugh and Vic Fangio, and bring both those guys over. Vic Fangio will be looking for a new job.
Could
at the
be
end of
leaving
the
Bears.
Not for any reason other than it's just not
Cleaning
working out
house.
between the two. He did a fine job. Jim Harbaugh, there's no way he's going to leave Michigan. He's not going to just spend 2 years at his alma mater and then ditch at the first sign of trouble. I can't imagine that'll happen, especially on how quickly he was kind of kicked out of San Francisco. He's got to keep some type of integrity about him. And really, I think the big thing for Michigan, where this isn't a college football podcast, but Jim Harbaugh gets himself a good quarterback, that's going to go a mile, for this team. So that's really what he needs. He just needs a good quarterback, and he's good to go. So I can't imagine him leaving. If he was going to go anywhere, I would maybe say he's got the Chicago connection. He's a Midwest kind of guy. The Chicago Bears drafted him. You have... Now, his career in Chicago wasn't very good, but, you have a little bit of a connection. That's the only thing I could see maybe pulling him out. But, again, he's not going to leave just after 2 years. That's such a bad-looking move.
And the only reason I'm on two sides of this. One, I feel like the only team that could get him to leave this offseason would be the Bears. Only because of that Chicago connection, younger quarterback to work with and mold. Let's be honest, Trubisky's closer to being a college player than he is being an NFL player. And Jim Harbaugh can work with that. Jim Harbaugh can work with younger guys. Look at when he benched he benched Alex Smith, the older veteran quarterback, for Kaepernick, the younger quarterback. So obviously he likes younger quarterbacks. That's what he's worked with. That's what he had success with. However, the Giants, if they go after Harbaugh, could they be able to do enough legwork to where a McVay situation happens, to where by the time the Bears get into it, Harbaugh's like, you know what, if he's thinking about coming out, it's, you know what, the Giants have been in the pocket, in the ear so much that, hey, I'm already scheduled to go there. I'm going to be the head coach there. This is a job, though, that at this point, I don't know, this is the only one where I know people are going to come here to go, who do you think the head coach is going to be? I don't know. This is one where I'm like, I don't know who is going to be the head coach of the Giants next year.
Well, I think it's a little too early to really have a firm answer on anything.
Because of the GM situation?
Yeah, I think the GM situation's a big thing, too. But it's also the fact that, sure, we have some hot coordinators that we can talk about. But we really don't have a solid guess on the direction that the New York Football Giants want to go. That being one side. And two, I'm not a firm believer that there truly is that number one,
this is our guy.
Yeah, for a lot of these teams where there's going to be quite a few teams that are looking for new coaches. And I can't really sit there and say for sure this is the guy who's going to go. Like when Todd Bowles was going to get his job from New York, the other side, the Jets, it was obvious that this guy was going to be one of the top candidates and that he was going somewhere. You have some of these guys that are so obvious. When John Fox got let go from the Denver Broncos, it was obvious that it was not going to take long for him to get another job. Some of those are just, they make perfect sense. I don't know if we have too many of those this year.
I want to ask you this to close this up before we go into draft mode the rest of the show. GM side. Do you have in your mind somebody that they can go after that you're like, you know what? I'd like to see this guy as the GM. Because for me, there's only one, and I don't even think he gets hired by him. And that's Bill Polian. If I'm the Giants, I try to do whatever I can to get Bill Polian out of ESPN and in my GM seat.
Yeah, Bill Polian's an interesting one. And there's been talks about him this season. You have a nice little connection with the Manning name.
Well, not just that, but also I think that Polian can bring to New York something that they are lacking after they fired Tom Coughlin. And that is just Coughlin this is the whole thing that this is a fallout of is getting rid of Tom Coughlin. That's what I think.
If only they could have just like promoted him into a GM position.
Exactly, because he's doing great things with the Jaguars. I think Polian, if you can get him in the GM spot, and I'm not an insider, but I, in my mind, in my view of the world, think that Bill Polian's a pipe dream for the Giants. But he would be the one that I would go all in on to get that, because not only does he have a connection to the Mannings, but he's a guy that knows player development. He knows he's phenomenal at drafting and can build you a culture on top of the team you already have right now.
Sure. I wonder if they're gonna go what we're here in Chicago with Chicago going with Acosta to get help. To find that GM. I wonder if they're going to go ahead and get a consultant to help them, which really slows down the process.
I think they already
did. They do that already?
I think they got the same guy that helped the Bears when
good old Ernie.
I think so. I think they said it was the same guy that helped the Bears in their search they were doing for Ryan Pace.
He was. I'm sorry, maybe I'm missing something really obvious, but I don't remember his New York Giants connection. But he's from the New York Giants originally, so that's where he's got the connection. So makes sense that he would go back. I was wondering about that because that really kind of slows down a process, which is not a bad thing. This is not something you want to just jump into because you're going to mess it up if you do. So be smart about it.
Well, and this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Who should the Giants have as their next coach for the next season?